In this particular video, we'll be focusing on analog equalizers, analog or vintage equalizers. So, for most of you that don't know, or for just a few of you that don't know, I don't. Yeah. So, whatever you see, majority of what you see, the plugins you see on your DAW, no matter what you're using, whether it is FL Studio, Studio One, Pro Tools, Logic Pro, Cubase, everything. Majority of the tools you actually see there are actually an emulation. It's actually an emulation of the hardware. Basically, there's already an hardware, so it's an emulation of that hardware, right? So, for instance, you have this EQ here, right? This is the parametric EQ we worked with in our last video, right? Well, this is actually digital. This is digital, all digital. But what we are working on this time around is going to be analog. So for this, I'm going to be using fat channel from Fender now. God is good. So Fender, is it Fender? Is it under the Fender folder? No, it's not. It's under the Prisoners folder. Okay. Yeah, so the equalizer is what we're going for, right? So that's me. I've been having this constant coughs. So yeah, you see this guy over here? This is a typical example of what an analog equalizer is, right? An analog equalizer, this is a typical example of it. We also have another one here, which is, see, the vintage is also an analog equalizer. Now, what is the major difference? The difference here is that unlike the parametric EQ here, where you can actually easily shift, I can decide to come over here and move anywhere I want, right? I can't actually do that easily on here, right? So this already has fixed parameters that I can actually follow. They are fixed parameters. As you can see here, I have the low filter, I have the low mid filter, I have the high mid filter, and also I have the high filter, right? So high filter, low mid filter. And for this low filter, it is fixed to 35 Hz, 60 Hz, 110 to 20 Hz. What this means is that I can come over here, or this 60 Hz that is currently selected here, they are seen right here. If I do plus, addition, or minus, it is basically moving on 60 Hz. So it is not touching 110, it's not going up to 220, it's basically on 60 Hz. Same thing here applies on all the other ones, right? Now, if you're switching equalizer to similar case, but like the way we have different kind of parametric EQs out there, different brands, you also have different brands of vintage or analog equalizers there, right? So this particular one, so the same thing, except that this one only has the low frequency and the high frequency, right? And for the low frequency, it can go as low as 20 Hz and as high as 100 Hz. That's for the low frequency range. And for the high frequency range, is in between 3000 Hz to 16,000 Hz. That's the high frequency. But the major difference we have between this equalizer and the other one I showed you guys earlier is this one has its attenuation. Now consider the attenuation like your bandwidth, similar to your bandwidth. So it can go thin and can also go wider, right? But you can only boost. Yeah, you can't minus. So you can't really have a subtractive EQ on this particular vintage EQ. You can't have a subtractive EQ here, but on the other one, on the other analog equalizers, start using the terms interchangeably, the analog EQ and the vintage EQ. On this particular equalizer, right, you can both do addition and also subtractive equalizer on this particular one. Why on the other one, this particular first one, this you can only add, but you can also attenuate, which you can't do over here. So it actually depends on what you want to use. You want to use it to achieve. But one major difference between this guy and the parametric equalizer is that it helps add color to your sound. Like it adds this, not really deep, but it's a mild saturation color that it actually adds. Mind you, there are parametric equalizers nowadays that can also add color to your sound. Yes, they actually add color to your sound. But these guys, these emulated versions of of analog equalizers actually designed in a way that actually emulates the entire hardware rack. So in that way, if you're looking to get or to achieve a mix that sounds retro, analog retro kind of style, huh? Without being too fine tuned, like on the parametric EQ now, you can actually fine tune every frequency individually. But if you're looking for a mix that you don't really want to fine tune anything, then analog EQ is your go-to. You can also achieve this on a parametric EQ, but I find that working, when I'm trying to achieve that kind of mix and I'm using a parametric EQ, I tend to overdo because everything is there. I can basically just click on any frequency and I can easily manipulate anything I want to do. But on the analog equalizer, it is limited, but it adds color to your music. It adds color to your music, right? Yeah. So that is analog equalizer. So analog equalizer is straightforward too. It's straightforward. If you've seen a analog equalizer before, like and the hardware, yeah. If you've seen yes, an analog mixer, yeah, a analog mixer. If you've seen an analog mixer before, the hardware, you see the knobs over it. So all those knobs, in most cases nowadays, you see the ones you either see high and low, just high and low, just high and low, or you see high, mid, and low, or in some cases you just see the high, mid, mid, and low on the knobs. That is all you have. So all these knobs have their parameters of where they can cover. So if you are boosting a low, it's possible that the low is boosting from 80 hertz, around 80 hertz. So if it's boosting around 80 hertz, that way it's just doing either plus or minus. I'm explaining the analog rack now, that is the physical rack, the hardware rack. So if you are boosting it up or low, it is always going to be there. So they already have fixed parameters, right? The analog mixer already has fixed parameters, just the way you have this one already on 60 hertz, 1.6k for the low mid frequency, 7.2k for the high mid frequency, and the high shelf here. So they already have fixed parameters too. But on a parametric EQ, you don't have a fixed parameter on a parametric EQ, so you can actually manipulate it however you want. You can manipulate on an analog equalizer too, but it is more limited. The major advantage you have over a parametric equalizer right now that I see is the fact that it can add warm color to your music. It can introduce warm color to your music, and it actually sounds great. Yeah, I hope I've not been able to confuse you, but convince you about it. Yeah, so this is analog. Is a sample of an analog equalizer, right? Remember to hit the subscribe button, very, very important. I'll see you guys in the next one.